Hello, my name is Sei Chang. I'm a sales professional specializing in Korea. It's been my observations over the years that many Western companies may not have a good understanding in terms of the true size of the Korean market and the opportunities it can bring to their businesses. I have been working in international business, mostly in the Asia-Pacific region and North America, with my specialties in the Korean market. In this video, I'd like to share my insights about the Korean market with a couple of examples that relate to Samsung and Hyundai for those Western companies who have their interest in this particular market. As well, in a couple of other video clips posted on my website, www.saleskorea.webs.com, I will explain how I can help Western companies succeed in the Korean market. First, when people think about the business opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region, many might think Japan and China as their primary markets, but regard Korea as a secondary opportunity. However, in recent years, things have changed quite rapidly and significantly. As a result, many Western companies may need to consider Korea as their primary opportunity. I would like to present a couple of examples to back up my argument here. In the television industry, Samsung took over the #1 vendor position from Sony in 2006. With today's consumer perception, it's nothing surprising that Samsung is the #1 company in the television business. But when it happened in 2006, it was such a surprising turn of event because Sony had been the #1 vendor in the business for such a long time. I believe it had been over 20 years before Samsung took over the #1 spot. Since, Samsung has maintained the top position. As of 2010, Samsung sells almost twice as many TV sets as Sony. And there's more. Another Korean TV vendor, LG, even took over the #2 spot from Sony in Q3 2010. When you think about the big name TV vendors just about 5 to 10 years ago, such as Sony, Panasonic, Toshiba, etc., this is a significant change made by the two Korean companies in a very short period of time. The TV industry is just one of the many examples where Korean companies are making extremely fast advances in their respective industry. A news article from the web version of Financial Times FT.com published on December 2, 2010 showed a similar example in the automotive industry. It reads, quote, "At Toyota, a senior executive confides Hyundai has become our competitive benchmark." This type of recognition for Hyundai made by a Toyota executive was almost unthinkable just about a couple of years ago. Not only in the TV and automotive industries, but also you can see this type of trend in many other industries as well. To name a few, in mobile phone industry, Samsung and LG are the #2 and #3 vendors in global sales today. In semiconductor industry, Samsung and Hynix together are taking up close to 60% of the market shares in DRAM and 40% in flash memory as of 2010. In the LCD panel industry, Samsung and LG Display together are taking up over 55% of the world market as of 2010. Despite of all these convincing evidences, I believe it's true that there are still many people in today's business world who do not realize the true size of the Korean market and the opportunities the market can provide for their businesses. I think this gap between the reality of the market and the perception by Western businesses can be explained by the fact that these Korean companies have been growing extremely fast in the last few years. For example, only 5 to 10 years ago, many of these companies I mentioned earlier, such as Samsung, LG, Hyundai, were fairly insignificant players in their respective industry. Their products were considered as low quality but cheap options. But no longer is this perception true in most of the products Korean companies produce and sell today. And this change is only after a short few years of impressive transformations made by the Korean companies. I'd like to introduce an incident which took place at Samsung in mid-1990s, which might sum up well how these transformations started and progressed. This is an amazing story in my mind, and I'm presenting it to you as I remember it. The CEO of Samsung at the time, Mr. Lee Gun-hee, made a yard full of cell phones burn in front of his employees, 150,000 of the phones to be more accurate, which by the way had passed through their QA process and accepted as good products. But apparently, these cell phones did not meet Mr. Lee's vision of a global product in terms of its quality and design. Most people believe today that this symbolic gesture taken by Mr. Lee, based on his vision of transforming Samsung from a second or even a third-tier company to one of the top companies in the IT industry, changed the fate of Samsung as a company. At the time, Mr. Lee laid out his goal of Samsung becoming one of the top 10 IT companies in the world in the following 10 years. Then, he told his employees that it was not going to be possible to accomplish this extremely ambitious goal without all Samsung employees collectively making extraordinary efforts. If you think about the big name IT companies which have been around for decades, for example IBM, HP, Sony, Intel, etc., I can tell you that there were not a lot of people who thought Mr. Lee's goal was realistic at the time. Because Samsung was definitely not in the same league as the IT giants I mentioned earlier, and putting Samsung in the same breath with them was just simply unthinkable at the time. But Mr. Lee urged Samsung employees to believe in themselves, that they can become one of the best in the industry. But in order to do that, things would have to change. He made a lot of things changed, but I think his famous quote at the time best sums up his determination and directions. It was, "Samsung employees, change everything except for your wife and kids." This is the end of the part 1 of this video. In the part 2, posted on the same website, www.saleskorea.webs.com, I will be discussing more on this Samsung example as well as a Hyundai example in order to demonstrate how Korean companies transformed themselves. So please come and join me in the part 2.